All right, now it's time to put together our waypoints. But before we do that, we need a way to be able to view our or very easily see our waypoints inside of our game. And that's going to require us to create a targeting system to an extent. When I say targeting system, I don't mean that we're going to do any like movement prediction or radar or anything like that, but we do need to present on the GUI layer a rectangle over our waypoint. And if it comes off screen, we need to make sure that we place an off-screen indicator somewhere so the player knows which direction to rotate towards to see the waypoint that they're trying to get to. So the first step of doing this is I'm going to put together two textures that are going to be used for those GUI elements. So opening up Photoshop, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to do, let's do 512 by 512, why not? I'm going to hit OK. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rounded rectangle, or why am I creating a rounded rectangle? I don't even need to create a rounded rectangle. I can just make a normal rectangle. So I'm going to do that with my marquee selection tool. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make sure black is on my background, and I'm going to hold down Shift and drag to about what I want it to be. Then I'm going to hit Control Backspace. Now that's not perfectly centered yet, but it's very easy to center it. If I control click both layer 1 and background, I can center it using these little guys at the top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into kind of a rounded effect by taking its fill opacity down to nothing and giving it a stroke, wherever you are, Mr. Stroke, and then bumping up its size to maybe about 10 pixels. And then giving it a center position. I think that gives us the most width. So I think that looks good.
Yeah, it looks nice.
I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt and get this up to kind of the edge of the screen, but not entirely to the edge of the screen. Now what I want to do is I want to cut out these four corners. That's actually very easy to do. I'm going to kind of eyeball this first, and then I'm going to fix it up later. I'm going to create another layer like this by creating the marquee selection tool. That's about the height I want. Maybe like that. Then I'm going to create two dummy layers for purposes of positioning only. So I'm going to create a new layer and hit Control Backspace to fill it in. Then I'm going to make sure that this layer is indeed centered onto our background. So I'm going to Control click on background and then center it up. Then I'm going to click back on layer 2 and I'm going to duplicate it by dragging it down to the new layer button, and I'm going to rotate it by holding down Shift to make sure that we're exactly at 90-degree angles. So now you'll notice that we have this nice cross and we can see the four corners that we only want on the screen. So how do we get it so those four corners are the only things that are visible? Well, with a little magic, we can do that very easily.
Otherwise known as masks.
Yeah. The one important thing to note about masks, though, is that will affect our layer style. So because our layer style includes our stroke, I want to rasterize that first. So I'm going to right-click Layer 1 and hit Rasterize Layer Style. So now I'm going to Control-click on Layer 2 to copy, and then I'm going to Control-Shift-click on Layer 2 so that I have a selection that encompasses the kind of cross sign that I have right here, kind of plus, really fat plus sign. And then I'm going to click the mask button on layer 1, and then I'm going to delete layer 2 and layer 2 copy because they were only used for creating that selection. Now you'll see that I have the inverse of what I actually want, which in Photoshop it's really easy to fix that because I can simply double click on the mask and click on invert. Coming back here, I have now masked out all of the bits I don't want to see.
Nice.
The final bit that I need to figure out is how to get rid of the background, which is really easy. I double click on the background and delete it. And now I have my target square. The only problem is that it's white. So to fix that, I can simply double click on layer 1 again, go to color overlay, and I can make it white. So now it's white and it's all good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S, and we already are in the right folder, which is good. So I'm going to call this target square. So this is the target square that'll appear over items on the GUI layer to make them easier to see from a distance. But I also need to do the off-screen indicator. Now the off-screen indicator is this little diamond that'll appear on the edge of the screen, which will show the user where they need to orient themselves in order to see a target. So to do that, I'm going to hit File, New. I'm going to go width of 32, height of 32, because it doesn't need to be all that big. I'm going to scroll in here. To create a diamond, it's very easy. I'm just going to go to my marquee selection tool. The size of the box doesn't matter because I can adjust that later. So I'm going to create that nice little thing. Remember, I held down Shift to get it to be a square. Hit New Layer, hit Control Backspace. Then I'm going to center this up again with the background. Then I'm going to rotate it by holding down Shift and rotating it so it's like a little diamond guy. And I see that's a little bit too big, so I'm going to nudge it to I'm going to hold down Shift, move it down one, move it up so it's nice and centered. Then I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt at the same time to center it like so. I think that looks fine. Now I'm going to double click on layer 1. I'm going to give it a color overlay of white and a stroke of, how about 2? And I'm going to select inside so it looks like a diamond. Now I want this to be transparent, so I'm going to double click on background and I'm going to delete that layer. And I now have my off-screen indicator. So I'm going to hit Control S and I'm going to say off-screen indicator. And that's how you spell indicator, right?
Yes.
Sweet. Okay, so jumping back into Unity, it'll import those assets into my textures resources folder. I want to make sure that both off-screen indicator and square are imported as a GUI texture type, so that it sets up the alpha channels appropriately and also gets rid of some of the blurry artifacty type things that you might see with textures when rendered in a GUI. Okay, so that's about all we need as far as resources for this video. So I'm going to jump back into Visual Studio and I'm going to create a couple more fields on my game resources. So I'm going to create a public static texture off-screen indicator equals texture resources. Come on. Resources load off-screen indicator. And then I'm going to do public static texture. And what was the other one? Target square?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't turn the target square into a GUI. Let me fix that real fast. I selected the wrong one. Okay, so the next one is target square. So I'm going to say target square equals texture resources load target square. Okay, so now I've imported through code both of my new textures. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a new mono behavior called targetable. And targetable is going to be responsible for displaying either the target square or the off-screen indicator. So inside of code, I'm going to create a new class called targetable. That's not how you spell targetable. That's how you spell targetable. Now targetable is going to inherit from mono behavior, which of course brings in the Unity engine up top. Then I'm going to write out a few constants. I'm going to say private const float base off-screen size equals 16. I'm going to do private const float base max size equals 128. And private const float base min size equals 100. And then I'm going to say private const float smooth movement is 25f. So those are my constants that you can alter to change the sort of appearance of your GUI. You can turn them into non-constants if you want them to be configurable by some means. Then I'm going to write a couple vector 3s. Now the vector 3s I'm going to have to keep track of is the screen position, the current position, the off-screen position, and the target position. That's because these movements will actually, or these target squares will kind of like move a little bit. They'll kind of try to catch up to where they're supposed to go through a lerping function. So that's why I have a difference between current position and target position. It makes it a lot smoother, and it gives the GUI a cool little effect. Next up, I'm going to do the same thing with sizing. So I'm going to say private float current size and target size. And the final variable that I need to keep track of is off screen. So we need to know if this current targetable is off screen and can't be rendered by the GUI, and instead we need to render our off screen indicator. Now we have two methods that we need to write. We need to write our public void update, of course, because every frame we need to recalculate our position, and then we need to write our own GUI. These are the only two methods that we need to write in this class. So starting with the update, this will be kind of blah.
Kind of blah?
Kind of blah. It's just a lot of annoying math. So let's go ahead and just get started. We'll start off by saying is off screen is false, and by calculating our off screen position. Our off screen position is going to be screen position, which is going to be camera main world to screen point transform dot position. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Now we need to figure out the distance between our camera and us. So I'm going to say var distance equals vector3 dot distance, passing in camera main transform position, comma, transform position. Next up, we need to figure out what size we want our indicator to be. And that's going to be mathf.clamp between base max size divided by distance, comma, base max size, comma, base min size, comma, base max size. So that's the target size of our square. So as we get closer, it'll get smaller, and as we get further away, it'll get bigger. Next up, we need to say our target position.x is going to be our screen position.x minus the current size divided by 2. Again, we do we subtract current size divided by 2 because when rendering with GUI, we end up with the top left of the texture being the coordinates that we pass in as position. So we have to offset it by half of its size. We do something similar with y, except we have to make sure to invert the y coordinates. So we say screen.height minus screenPosition.y minus current size divided by 2. Next up, we need to calculate our off-screen position. So our off-screen position, x, is going to be screen position, x, minus base off-screen size divided by 2, f. Our off-screen position, y, is going to be screen height minus screen position, y, minus base off-screen size divided by 2. So a lot of redundancy here, but that's just how things are. Next up, I want to see if the thing is off-screen. To know if something's off-screen, we simply say if screen position.x, .z is smaller than 0, we know it's off-screen. Therefore, we set is off-screen to true. And we set the off-screen position, x, equals screen position, x, smaller than screen width, divided by 2f, question mark, base off-screen size, divided by 2f, colon, screen width, I'll explain this in a second, base off-screen size times 2.
My head exploded.
Well, what we're doing here is we have a basic ternary where we say the off-screen position x, if the screen position x is smaller than half the screen width, then we're to the left. So if you imagine like, let's just open up Photoshop. 1024, why not? So imagine this is our viewport into the game. If an object is behind you and it's here, we want the corresponding off-screen indicator to be here, right? So if this is behind you, not in front of you, but behind you, we want it to float over to the left-hand side of the screen, right?
Yep.
Now what happens if it crosses that side, and so now it's on to the right of you? Well, then we want the off-screen indicator to be on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Now we want to do this for both top and bottom. So for example, if it's on the bottom, we want the off-screen indicator to be here. If it's on the top, we want the off-screen indicator to be up here.
Okay.
So that's why we have this ternary in place. We're saying if the screen position X is smaller than the screen width divided by 2, then stick it on the left-hand side. What is the left-hand side? Well, the left-hand side is the size of the off-screen indicator divided by 2. Otherwise, stick it on the right-hand side. What's the right-hand side? It's the width of the screen minus the base off-screen size multiplied by 2. And again, this is to get rid of the discrepancy between the fact that the upper left coordinate of the texture is considered to be the position of where we draw it.
Okay, gotcha.
So let's go ahead and do the same thing with Y. I'm going to say off-screen position Y equals screen position Y is smaller than screen height divided by 2. So if it's smaller than screen height divided by 2, then we want to return base off-screen size divided by 2f. Otherwise, we want to return screen.height minus base off-screen size multiplied by 2. It's the exact same calculation, just done in the other axis.
Alrighty, awesome.
Now we have to handle the corners, because sometimes we want it to just jump to this corner if it's past a certain threshold, or jump to this corner if it's past to another threshold. We want to figure out which axis we want to lock it on, because it has to appear somewhere on the edge of the screen. It can't ever appear in the center. So it has to always be somewhere on the edge. So what I'm going to do is say if off-screen position X is smaller than 0, which actually technically means that it is off-screen. So I'm going to say is off-screen is true, which means we need to not display our target square, but we need to display our off-screen indicator, correct? If that's true, then off-screen position.x is going to be base off-screen size divided by 2. However, if off-screen position x is greater than screen.width minus base off-screen size, it also is off-screen, and we want to set its x to the right-hand side of the monitor, which is screen.width minus base off-screen size multiplied by 2. Next up, we need to do the same thing with y. You'll notice a lot of repetition. I'm not breaking this out to methods because honestly, it is straightforward if you think about it, and I'm not going to, there's no reason to break this out into methods because, I mean, it's repetitive, but it's common that you run into things like this in game code. So basically, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm just hooking it up to the edge of the screen. If it's past a certain threshold in either X or Y. Okay, so then we want to say is offscreen equals true, and we want to say offscreen position dot y equals screen height minus base offscreen size multiplied by 2. I actually don't want to do screen dot height minus current size. I want to do screen dot height minus base offscreen size, because the offscreen size never changes, whereas the current size, when it is on screen, does change depending on how close you are to the target.
All right. So repetitive, but it covers all our areas of space, and that's what we need.
Yep. Now, there's 2 more things we got to do. I'm going to full screen Visual Studio so I can get more of this on the same monitor. We need to lerp from our current size to our target size. So I'm going to say current size equals mathf.lerp, current size target size, delta time times 4. Then I'm going to say current position dot x equals mathf.lerp current position x target position x smooth movement times time dot delta time, and we're going to do the same thing for y, which is just the exact same thing but for the y axis. So now we have current position x, and we're lerping with that based off our smooth movement, and current position y, which we're lerping off the base blah 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? Just copy and paste what I just said before about the x-axis in your mind with what I'm saying about the y-axis.
There you go.
Okay, so the next thing I gotta do is the on GUI. Now, in this particular case, we are going to have it be displayed as white. Actually, no, yellow's better. I like yellow more. So I'm going to say var old color. See how things can change like this? I mean, that's pretty much the epitome of...
That's ongoing game development.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to sandwich all my on GUI code with caching the current GUI color before I change the GUI color to color.yellow. Then I'm going to say if we're off screen, GUI.drawTexture. Now, the rectangle of the off-screen indicator is always going to be off-screen position X, off-screen position Y, base off-screen size, and base off-screen size. The texture we're rendering, not surprisingly, is game resources.offScreen indicator. Now, if we are on screen, then we'll simply do GUI draw texture, passing in a new rectangle of current position, not target position, but the current position, X, current position, Y, and then current size and current size, passing in the texture of game resources dot target square. All right.
Okie dokie.
So how do you feel about this code, Steve?
It's a lot of repetitive code, but really, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and test out this and see how miserably it fails.
You've little faith.
I'm going to go ahead and create... Maybe I shouldn't have deleted that cube all that while ago. I'm going to create a test cube.
The all-hated test cube.
I was just thinking about Portal for a second. My companion cube right here.
Companion cube.
I'm thinking about Portal. Let's go ahead and throw our targetable script onto our cube, and it should just work.
I can't help but think that you destroyed it because it was starting to have feelings for you.
Yeah. And look at that. We have our off-screen indicator, which does indeed work on both left and right and top and bottom. And if I run all the way out here, I'm going to destroy a few asteroids because it's fun. And then if I need to find it again, I can simply look at the top of my screen and I know exactly how I need to rotate. And that's the whole purpose of how the off-screen indicator works, is it should tell the user exactly how they need to rotate in order to get that object back into view.
Very nice.
So honestly, I think that's pretty much all we need. So I guess it's on to waypoints.
Woohoo! All right.